Heavyweights in the world of literature and academia meet here in Cartagena every year. The Hay Festival is a place for cultural exchanges, as well as a place to celebrate world-class literature and journalism. It's all about education and development. This year, 180 participants from 21 different countries gathered for what's considered one of the most important literature festivals in the Hispanic world. I speak to Jaime Abello. He is the director and co-founder of the Gabo Foundation. He shares the story of how the discipline of Nobel Laureate Gabriel Garcia Marquez helped him amass an amazingly impressive literary legacy.
Tropical weather, colonial architecture, the Caribbean Sea, vibrant people. Cartagena boasts what late Nobel Laureate Gabriel Garcia Marquez was known for: magical realism, or fiction that integrates elements of fantasy into realistic settings. He once stated that surrealism came from the reality of Latin America.
Garcia Marquez.
Una nueva y arrasadora utopía de la vida.
He was a guy that could bring out magic of reality. He was a storyteller, fundamentally.
While strolling around this mystical place, it's unavoidable to heed its historical importance and the impact it's made on the fascinating world of letters and storytelling. Here, I met Jaime Abello.
Jaime.
Finally, we met.
Yes, let's go this way.
It is this way.
Yeah,
Let's go.
I want to talk to you.
He was a dear friend of Garcia Marquez.
He once said that love is the most important theme in the history of humanity, and in 100 Years of Solitude, for example, you have a character who seeks out love and doesn't find it. Love in the time of cholera, love triumphs, although boy, it was a long search to get there, wasn't it? Can you talk about that theme? That's what makes such works by Shakespeare and others timeless, don't you think?
Yes, yes. And love and death, of course, and power. You know, these are the big themes of literature, but Garcia Marquez was a very vital guy. So I think that he recognized love as a powerful and force of nature. And this city, Cartagena, where we are now, is where there is a novel called, two novels, of Love and Other Demons is one, and Love in Times of Cholera. And both of them depict love as something that you cannot control yourself, something that will move you, in one case, for many years waiting for a love that could not happen before, and in other case, in the case of the Love and Other Demons, you cannot control this force of nature that is love when you are, for instance, a priest. So definitely love is fundamentally his work.
Jaime Abello is the CEO and co-founder of the Gabo Foundation. He was invited by the Nobel Laureate himself to help him carry out one of his most ambitious life projects. His goal was to foster better informed citizens by training the new generation of journalists through an ethical but creative style of writing.
Gabo is considered one of the great authors of the 20th century. For me, and for the viewers, that means doing this with a book. But with you, it's different. You knew him as the writer, but also as the man. How would you describe him?
He was one of the greatest journalists that ever existed, and of course, one of the greatest novelists, especially in our language, in Spanish. He's so important, like Cervantes, for instance. And he was also a very popular man, a person loved by multitudes, admired. He's present in our everyday life like a pop culture icon. You will see his face and his phrases or sentences in the walls of Colombian cities. It's part of our nationality also. So, but I can say also that I met him as one of the warmest and smartest guys that that marked my life forever. I am the director of the foundation created by him, but part of our work today is around his legacy, not only on journalism. We study him, we are collecting his archives, and we produce a lot of content around him. So I would say that I have Garcia Marquez permanently present in my life. And of course, I remember many situations and anecdotes that we shared, for instance, here in Cartagena, where he built a house. And I would say that Cartagena is not the small town, but the capital city of Garcia Marquez worlds.
A young Gabo arrived at this port city in the late 1940s after the events of El Bogotazo, a series of riots that took place in several cities across Colombia after the assassination of presidential candidate Jorge Gaetan.
The first time that he came here, he stayed in a hotel in this place. At that time there was a curfew enacted, so he was, the first night he found closed the hotel, so he had to sleep in one of these
Oh, wow.
in the park.
Oh, my gosh.
And the police, they got him. This is Simón Bolívar. Simón Bolívar he admired a lot Simón Bolívar, like many of us, but he decided to write a book that is called A General in Its Labyrinth, about the last days of Bolívar and the loss of power and recognition, and you know, when people is not grateful but the contrary, because the last day of were bitter days. And it's an incredible book about, you know, how the big men could finish like Bolívar, alone and die alone, and with a lot of deceptions. He also decided to establish his project, the foundation, in Cartagena.
Indeed, it was here where he decided to end his path towards a law career to focus on his true calling, journalism.
The foundation is located in the same street where was located the newspaper where Gabriel Garcia Marquez started when he was 22 years old to work as reporter.
It's almost bookends, the beginning, and then...
Yes, and the culmination.
Yes.
This book is very important because it, after 20 years working in the workshops, when we started with this book, we understood as organization that our mission should be not only activities, but keeping Garcia Marquez's legacy. And this means Gabo journalist, and is an anthology that he loved, but it's also like, you know, like an album.
I'm going to pull a quote from him where he said, "I don't want to be remembered for 100 years of solitude, nor the Nobel Prize, but for the newspaper. I was born a journalist. I feel more like a reporter now than ever. I carry it in my blood." Journalism was such a big part of who he is and was.
Yes, the craft and the job and the dedication as journalist was fundamental to, you know, to refine his literary techniques, but also he had a parallel life as a fiction writer and as journalist for more than 50 years. And if you, the compilation of his pieces, journalistic pieces, and his journalistic books, in the number of them are so important or so big, let's say, as the fiction work. And people, not everybody knows that. He wrote reportage, articles, opinion pieces, op-eds, etc., for more than 50 years.
A rich, rich life. Another quote from him, and I want to get your thoughts on this. He says, "I see journalism as a literary genre at the same level as the novel, poetry, the short story, and theater. It is important because it is a literary genre that has its feet on the ground." I think back to Hemingway, who also started as a journalist, and the skills that they develop as journalists, and somehow they transfer that to their works of fiction.
Yes, when, you know, Garcia Marquez is being identified with the concept of magical realism. And people normally think in the magical aspect. But journalism helped him to, you know, dig in reality and to bring out the stories. And there are several fiction books that are strictly based on journalistic research or investigation. And on that he invented with the magic of the power of his word.
I was in Key West a few years back and went to Hemingway's home, and he had this office and his typewriter's still in there. He would get there every morning at like 6 and write till about noon, and then he'd go to the bars and drink and have a great time. But there was a certain discipline attached to his writing. What was he like in terms of work habits?
This is very important. You need talent, and you need research, creativity, but also you need discipline. Garcia Marquez was a very disciplined person. He worked in writing each day at least 4 hours, and he was like a monk on that. He insisted in the need of this discipline and perseverance. And you mentioned Hemingway, and this is lovely because today the testimonies of their work are together in Austin, Texas, where in the archives of Garcia Marquez and Hemingway are in the university, in the Ransom Center. And I would say that in this sense they were similar. Their love for journalism and for literature, but also their habits and their discipline to make it happen.
Did he ever have writer's block or times where he questioned himself, or do you think, or was it always just something, as you said, this talent and this gift?
He needed to produce daily as a journalist. So in certain sense, this is one of the advantages of this experience as a reporter. He edited a lot his manuscripts. He changed many things, but he was, in a certain sense, disciplined. And I would tell you something. He he increased his productivity as writer when he started to use computer. He was one of the first writers, at least in Latin America, to use you know, these Mac computers. So he once he said to me that he doubled his capacity as writer thanks to the use of computers, but he loved to print each day and not to leave the work in the computer. He liked to print every day the work of the day, and at the same time, when it was corrected, you know, with the corrections, he liked to throw it and to destroy it.
And what does he write here to you?
Yes, it's to my dear team of collaborators at the foundation with a big hug, Gabriel. And then it's interesting to show you another picture, this one. Let me show you. Here is with the big guy, with Fidel.
Oh, there he is, yeah.
in La Habana.
He developed these friendships with Fidel and others. What was it about Fidel and Gabo that brought them together?
Garcia Marquez was very interested in the Cuban Revolution, and he was one of the first reporters that covered, these first or 2 months of the revolution. Then he came back to Cuba 15 years later, in the 75. He was famous, but he had also strong interest in filmmaking and movies. He was very interested in Fidel's personality, but he found also somebody that helped him to develop some projects. For instance, an international film foundation in La Habana, and a school, the International School of Film and Television, that still today is a very important place to study for people from different countries of Latin America. They both admire themselves mutually. I think that Fidel, of course, beside this great writer, Fidel was he loved books, and he was, he had something of big level to tell his stories. But Garcia Marquez was very interested in this kind of David that had fought against Goliath of the American Empire. Maybe you cannot love Fidel, but you have to recognize that he left a print in history, and Garcia Marquez also, and they had this friendship very close.
He used this friendship with Fidel Castro to pursue peace in many respects, to open up a channel of dialogue between Bill Clinton and Fidel Castro. Here he was right in the middle trying to figure out some way to get both sides to talk to one another.
Garcia Marquez was not only a writer, journalist, film script writer, but he was also a very political man. He was interested in peace building, interested in making people communicate. He was a very positive man, and he had not only this relation with a character like Fidel, at the same time with Bill Clinton, but also with many presidents and political people that looked for him. I think that he did his best trying to, to break the blockade and to help these opposite parts to dialogue. He was also in Colombia, for instance, linked to the peacemaking process between the Colombian governments and the guerrilla forces. I would say that he was very committed to humanitarian causes, but also to peacemaking.
Gabriel Garcia Marquez was part of a literary movement known as the Latin American Boom, which took place during the 1960s and 70s. Latin American authors during this time displayed a style of writing which challenged conventional literature, which at that time was considered experimental. Some of Garcia Marquez's work has been adapted for the big screen, such as Love in the Time of Cholera. Now, Netflix, under the guidance of his two sons, is adapting his most acclaimed novel for the streaming service. 100 Years of Solitude features one of his most iconic fictional towns, Macondo.
There is a certain consensus that Garcia Marquez books adaptations to films has not yet reached full success. I hope that 100 Years of Solitude in series by Netflix will be okay, but it will be something different to the book. We have to prepare with the idea of literary tourism around a renewed interest in Garcia Marquez. And with this type of projects, there will be a new wave of cultural tourism around Garcia Marquez.
One final question, which you kind of brought me to with your last response. The importance of your work, given that this love for his work and his accomplishments continues even after his death, and you're a big part of keeping that alive. How important is this work?
He wanted to give opportunities to young journalists to train and to learn and to grow. So we organize workshops, not only in Cartagena and Colombia, but in Latin America. Besides that, we are now working with young people and children on storytelling with the idea of we understand that today, thanks to the technology, this is a real power for citizenship. But we have to learn and to teach how to use it in an ethical and creative way. There are many projects. We are really committed and happy on this perspective of working around this big guy that was our master, our teacher, our inspirer.
Jaime, thank you so much for keeping his legacy alive, but also for spending some time with us, because obviously you've got a big job. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.